Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. We've all had to overcome our fair share of childhood trauma, things that we probably just wish hadn't happened in our childhood, things that we don't remember fondly, and some of us more so than others. But our next guest, Susan Gold, she has written the book, Toxic Family, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom. Susan turns the standard paradigm on its head, courageously leading others through their own journey of abuse, addiction, and surviving narcissism, all while creating a distinctly empowering personal and professional life. We need people like Susan Gold to let us know that, hey, just because it happened in our childhood doesn't mean we have to dwell on it, and we don't have to keep reliving it and re-traumatizing ourselves. We can get around it, get over it, and leave it in our childhood as nothing more than a memory. So why don't we welcome Susan to the show, as maybe we'll get her to describe a little bit about some of the dynamics of what happened to her while she was growing up. Okay, welcome to the show, Susan. And I know you had this really we can't say wonderful story about your childhood, because we're talking about turning our childhood trauma into our fantastic life, and how we can actually, there's lessons, and how we can actually move forward past those lessons, right? So
there were a lot of bright and fun spots, though, laced throughout my childhood. That was one of the confusing things about it, Michael. It was such a juxtaposition. My mother could be incredibly loving and then just flip on a dime and be beating you out of seemingly nowhere. And my father was a fun drunk. He was a genius astrophysicist, but he was also an alcoholic. He had an issue with womanizing and was a bit of a narcissist, but it was always an adventure.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, my dad was, when you actually got to hang out with him, he was pretty cool. We used to watch baseball, and do you remember Watergate?
I sure do. I've heard of it.
Yeah. I actually sat and watched the hearings with my dad on his lap as a child. He was like, "Here, son, you need to watch this and learn," and it actually colored some of what I do today, right? So then that's the cool stuff, but the not so cool stuff was the alcoholism and the addiction, right? So how did you first learn to like really warmly invite the good parts and filter out some of the other stuff and learn from it?
So growing up, I knew there was trauma. I have memories going way, way back, Michael. But when I really realized the depth, I was in my early 20s. So I was an adult. I was living on my own in New York City. And some of the same red flags were coming up that I saw demonstrated in my home. Horribly abusive relationships, arguments. I was lying when it was just as easy to tell the truth. I was starting to lose my value system. I was losing focus on my goals, and I had been incredibly driven up to that point. I mean, I left that home the morning after I graduated high school, the 7:45 in the morning, and I didn't often go back. I was 19 living in Greenwich Village for the first time in New York City on an internship from college. And I was working in the entertainment industry quite young and successfully. So that's really when I realized the remnants and what a traumatic childhood left you with as an adult. I had very low self-esteem, self-worth. I had porous boundaries. I was a chameleon. I would become who I thought you may want me to be in order to garner your approval. And yeah, I was easily influenced.
Yeah. Well, as I remember in the entertainment industry, you had some pretty cool influencers that you actually got to work with, though, right?
Well, when I was in my home growing up, one of the things that kept me going was dreaming of going to New York City. I used to watch Barbara Walters on my beanbag chair in my belly in the
Yeah.
basement. And I worked for a large global talent agency once I got out of college, but it wasn't quite enough to make ends meet. So I started personal training on the side. And Barbara Walters actually became a client of mine, which was really interesting. And she also volunteered to come to work with me one day after she learned I had been sexually abused in the workplace.
Oh, wow. That must have been okay. Okay, I'm gonna have my starstruck moment for a second here. These things only last a couple seconds. Trust me, because Barbara Walters was a hero that I'd never met, and that some of my journalism, I tried to like, well, how would she have done this? Because I just love watching her interviews on television. So what was it like having Barbara Walters go to work with you to advocate for you? It, because of sexual abuse or harassment in the
Well,
workplace.
ultimately, I said, no, that's okay, Barbara, I'll handle it. But she was quite supportive, and she was engaged to a gentleman who was running a film distribution company at the time. And she said, you know what, he's looking for an assistant. You could easily slip in there. But I said, yeah, no, I'll be okay. And I did confront my boss that day, and he said, do you have everything you need? And I said, of course. And he said, great, you're fired. So I think I had 2.5 months of income in the bank. I was newly sober. I understood I was having issues because I was using alcohol as a crutch, and I had learned well from my father. I had extricated myself from an abusive, toxic relationship. And I didn't want to go back into that relationship. So I ended up being introduced to Donnie Deutsch, who's a bit of a cultural icon. He's an entrepreneur and a television host, but back then he was running his dad's ad agency. And he wanted Andy Warhol to endorse Pontiac. And he said, do you think you could get him? And I'm like, I don't know, I'll try. So I couldn't get anybody to pick up the phone. And I took the train down to the factory and knocked on the door. And Fred answered, Andy's manager. And I told him why I was there. And he said, come back tomorrow and I'll let you talk to Andy. So I did. And the next day I was sitting in the foyer sweating bullets, Michael, when the double doors into Andy's studio flew open, and it was super dark in there. And Fred peered out and he said, okay, Andy, we'll see you now. And I'm like, okay. So in I went, and it was really dark, but there was a pin spotlight coming down on this table and platinum hair going 17 different directions and a lot of scribbling with colored pencils. But what really caught my attention and also caught Andy's attention were the three pugs that were running around the studio, little dogs with the smushed faces. And he loved these three little dogs. They would tug at his pants leg and he'd pick them up like they were little kittens. So he didn't make eye contact with me as I was pitching him for this project. And finally, like, he looked up, he looked at me and he said, now, really, why should I do this? And I just fell silent for a moment. And then I said, because you can have the pugs in the shot with you. And he said, okay, I'll do it. And that's really the deal that launched my career. And I think my upbringing, one of the tools that I utilized and had naturally, and I believe we all have it, was a strong sense of intuition.
Mm-hmm.
I was also highly empathic, so I could sense your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also telepathic at that point. But adults didn't really like little 8-year-old, 9-year-old girl telling them things that were actual truths. So, but I could intuit in that room, and that's what caused me to pause. I knew he loved those dogs more than life itself. And I didn't know if that was okay with Donnie or not and the Pontiac dealers, but I took a risk.
Well, a risk that paid off, right? You know.
Yeah, I became known for matching celebrities with brands and had a very wonderful career doing that. It led me into television and producing for TV and for film.
Yeah. Well, did you know at the time about how courageous you were?
Well, I didn't really feel like I had much of a choice. I mean, I was brave. I always knew that I wanted to work in the entertainment industry, be on the business side of it. I felt more comfortable with those that were back then described as celebrities and influencers because I knew they were human beings and I could sense their emotion, and they were doing it publicly, one, pants leg at a time in front of all of us. So I had great understanding and compassion, and I think that really helped me in my career, and it's also what kept me safe in my family of origin.
Okay. Because so many times, like people, they tell these stories, and it's like, well, and their esteem was still low at the time, but they were doing things that were extremely courageous, So you just want people to know that, hey, there is that inside of you, and you just have to constantly keep tapping into it, right? So.
Yeah, I think so. I think I really recognized it when I decided, okay, I'm going to write a book. Because I had been encouraged to write a book about my life story for a while, but I really didn't think it was that interesting or that unique. And then when I put it all down on paper, I think it was right before, yeah, it was right before the final galley. And I read a chapter and I was like, oh my gosh, that woman is strong. And oh, that's you. Hello.
Yeah. What was your first? Was that your first realization that you are as strong as you are?
People would tell me it all the time that I was independent, that I was really accomplished, but I didn't feel it. I was very codependent. And I had to have male attention since like second grade and Billy Fritz on the playground. And I had such a fear of abandonment, Michael, and neglect. It was just such a trigger, and still is. I still have to work with it. But I was so dependent that I would get myself in relationships that maybe weren't, the best for me, just to hold on to something that I felt would be stationary, and it cost me greatly.
Yeah. Well, this may sound like a weird question. Were you more married to the fact that you were attached to somebody, or were you more um, attached to the person as a person?
Well, it was both, but a relationship that's built on codependency, I believe, is destined to fail ultimately, or perhaps not flourish.
Yeah, yeah, I agree on that one, um, because it is a trend of also a trend of children who of addicts and codependents, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the tributes left over. Still working through it, but doing a lot better.
Yeah. I think I'm going to say this because I believe that I'm still a work in progress, and we all, as human beings, are a work in progress. and till we're done. Um, but we're not going to talk about the done part yet. um, what what? I know you still have some struggles. What are some of your biggest struggles now?
Well, I still have that echoing of, the lack of self worth. I'm much stronger on my 2 feet. I think I had a miraculous experience. I had lived in New York and was very successful and was invited to Los Angeles for what I thought was a great career move, Michael. But I think now in hindsight, it was to meet one of my greatest gurus, and that was the man who would become my ex-husband. And I say he was a great teacher because he helped me step up and into my authentic power. He helped me step into authentic compassion for who I am and that little being, that little beacon of light that's inside me that I kicked around and belittled and betrayed repeatedly. But I met my husband and thought he was everything that I had ever wanted. He seemed like he was right out of a golden age of Hollywood film, and he was. He had a horrendous childhood himself and had constructed a false persona, and is one that I believe was a narcissist. So experiencing that really helped me as a human being evolve.
And how did you evolve?
Well, it was about 13 years into the partnership, and we were married and had a child. When I really felt drained and I didn't quite know why. My life was getting smaller. I was really feeling like I couldn't continue this walk, like I was dragging a 250-pound dead weight forward. And I kept pointing a finger out and three would come back at me, that old spiritual axiom. So I would find blame within. But what ultimately happened was I tried to make my husband accountable fiscally, and we went into mediation to create what I thought would be a postnuptial agreement. And we came to the last term, and I thought, oh my gosh, my marriage is saved. Even though I knew it was way past its expiration date, I didn't want my marriage to fail. And he folded his arms and his eyes went in those cold lizard-like slits. And he said, I'm hiring an attorney and I'm filing for divorce. And that intuitive voice that's been with me this whole time, Michael, was never more clear and resonated so thoroughly that it stayed with me for the following year. And thank God it did. But it said, this is the universe doing for you what you cannot do for yourself. And it was a year of excruciating hell. He remained in our family home, but I couldn't really refer to it as a home. Then he took up residence in the master. I, by choice, was on a mattress on the floor in a partial conversion in our garage in a home that I had bought and paid for our family and maintained. And it was a year in that circumstance. And I had learned as a longtime meditator how to hold silence, how to keep no contact, including no eye contact. And it was heartbreaking to understand who the man that I had loved and married really was as an individual. And holding no eye contact and no contact for that year got me through the period until we could come to terms. And I could write him a 6-figure check and he could move on to his next source of supply. And I believe it really helped me. It was a gift of the universe. I feel like this was the ultimate lesson I came to walk through. And now I'm able to share my experience with others because it was everything I learned growing up for survival, everything I had learned in sobriety and recovery, everything I had learned working through clinical depression, all came to a head in this experience. And I feel there was no accident, and I hold no malice towards my ex-husband. nor do I hold malice towards my family members. I feel they were all the perfect players in this ebullient movie of life that I've been privileged to walk through. And I feel there was purpose in this life story. And there was a beautiful reason that I've moved through it as I have. And it's huge perspective and a huge paradigm shift because, so many of us like eat the rat poison and feel like the perpetrator should die, not us.
Yeah.
So I had to really, really let go of all that victimhood and say, I don't want to be in that self-contained prison. I had to take the barbed wires that were facing in and open up the gate. And I feel I'm free as a result of it. It's a lot of work. It's not the easier, softer way, but it's the only way through for me. And I have so much gratitude.
Right. You say, let's put it this way. What does your life purpose look like now, and how are you living it?
So I wrote a book called Toxic Family, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom. And I'll be honest, Toxic Family was not my title. My title was Magical Illumination because that's what I feel like it's been. But it wasn't always a magical illumination. And Toxic Family does describe my lineage. It was hurt and abused children, raising hurt and abused children, and it goes way back. And I'm just grateful to have had the career that I did and to meet the people that are household names and work with them and see their humanity. But this is my purpose. I feel like there's so many pieces of the puzzle that fit together perfectly for me to write such a book about such a taboo topic. I believe we need to have these conversations. I believe a lot of us are carrying around a sack of junk that doesn't even belong to us. I believe there's a lot of shame that we carry as individuals that may not even be in our zip code. And there's no reason we need to carry it anymore. And to come full circle and to a place of profound forgiveness and a real understanding for our humanity has been almost worth the price of entry. I think next time I might read the small print in the contract before I come in.
Maybe, right? What is it you want people to learn?
That we're all human beings, and to understand that there's a team supporting you, that you're here on this earth for purpose, that you have value, that your life has meaning, regardless of your current circumstance or something that happened in your past, and that we're all one.
That is a very important lesson that I wish we would learn that globally, that we're all one, right?
I think it's happening. I have faith. I feel like these outdated patriarchal systems that have been set up are starting to chip away at the edges, and some we're even seeing crumble. So I'm actually optimistic than pessimistic. It's painful, but I think it's happening, Michael. I have hope.
Hope is important, isn't it? You know?
Yes, it's very important. And I've had to find it in strange places, but it's certainly kept my feet on the ground and helped me put one in front of the other. I really think we all have exit points. There's certain points where you can choose to end the movie if you wish. I know it's been true for me. The first time I really thought about that was when I was 6. I was 6 years old and was in the kitchen by myself. I had a cabinet open where they kept all the cutlery, the pans, the cooking pans, and I took one of the knives out of the the carving block. And I looked at the blade and I thought, if I could just lance this through my little heart, it could all be over. This could all be over. And then my mother like thundered from the hallway, and I shoved that knife in so quickly and shut the doors. But that's the first real thought of suicide that I had. And it came up repeatedly over and over again. And I have to say, anybody that's contemplating that, like, hold on for the miracle, because you may be offing a different person than the being you truly are. And I'm glad I've stayed on for the ride, and that I've found hope in different places. Sometimes it was just like watching a bird fly,
Yeah.
or focusing on the color baby pink. Or when I was a kid, a lot of it was lying on my back in the backyard, looking up into the clouds and talking with the angels, asking them to, beam me up.
Yeah. Um, that's that right there is very very touching. I kind of get an idea what you're saying with that, and I think a lot of people get an idea of, especially if they've been through certain types of trauma, right? Um, do you think if we can see past those exit strategies, especially some of the really big exit points that you talked about, that when we see past them, that something bigger happens next?
Yes, absolutely. That's been my own experience. It hasn't been easy to move through them, but it's always led me to a better place. And I think that once I'm able to really say no to that and continue to walk, certainly as an adult. I mean, the last 2 months of that divorce process were very difficult. And I started to go down that roller coaster hill. I knew that I was tending towards clinical depression. And then the idea of suicide passed through my head. And I knew instantly, I need to set up a friend for every day of the week, a different friend for each day. And I need to call them, and I need to check in. And if I call them to check in and I'm feeling any kind of suicidal impulse or thought, I need to commit that I'm going to call the next person on the list and keep calling until I have a conversation. And I was really grateful for that tool, and it got me through that experience, because I would have been taking out the wrong person. I would have left so many people behind that actually needed me. And now that I've been able to craft this book and put it out, I see how my experience is helping others, and it's been well worth it.
Yeah. I'm absolutely certain that it has been well worth it. What have you been able to teach your children?
I have one son.
Yeah.
He's 19, trying to work his way through college in 3 years instead of 4. And what I've demonstrated to him is that he is his own individual. He is not an extension of me. He has his own path. He has his own journey. He has his own high points here that he too signed up for. That I am a parent. I'm not a placebo. He's not my friend. He's my son. And that he is entitled to a stable platform, which I gave him. I did everything I could to, sort of make his childhood surroundings predictable.
Mm-hmm.
It was chaos in my home. You never knew what was around a corner. It could be dinner for 7, or it could be something thrown at you, some kind of projectile. And he didn't have that. And I see how he was able to flourish as a result of that. And it's not perfect. Life is not perfect for anyone. You can come from the most incredible of homes and still have your human issues. I think that's why we're here, to
Right.
have those experiences and to evolve from them, to feel more compassion and expand that compassion and love to our fellows.
Yeah. And are you extending that love?
I think so. I feel like I am. People say that they feel better after a conversation with me. They see a lot of light coming from me. And I think when you've walked through a lot of pain and you do have that compassion, but also, Michael, the key is having it for yourself as well. So you're not drained. Other people can't drain your energy when you have that kindness and respect for your own being. It's much easier to draw boundaries and to give from a cup that overflows rather than one that is half full. And then to say, yeah, I'm sorry, I have to excuse myself now, when you know you're tiring or that's enough. So you have those special boundaries. And that's something that I've been learning as I've taken this journey.
Yeah. Yeah. There was I know in my own life that there was a moment where um, somebody said you're so empty, and they wanted to fill me back up again, but they knew that that wasn't what they should do. They knew that they had to teach me how to fill myself.
Did you end up, Michael, at that time reaching out for help, or did you go within? How were you able to sort of shift that paradigm for yourself?
It became a very, very rocky road. I went from one abusive, draining spouse to another abusive, draining spouse, and um, it took I would say another 7 years from that point to the point where I actually found it was kind of funny. I found this group of ladies who were talking about this life coach who was so fantastic and everything, and I followed them to a free seminar, and then I took his life coaching thing, and I just learned a whole bunch of stuff of that just started to heal me, you know, and along the way I had met who is now my wife, and we went through some of it together, and my other spouses before that would have never have gone through. Matter of fact, one of them poked fun at him because one of his things was make a collage of what you want your life to be, this dream board thing, and my one ex poked fun at it. She says, "Oh yeah, you spent a couple $1,000 for somebody to teach you to paste magazine clippings to a piece of poster board. Oh gee, that's wonderful, isn't it?" You know, because she was angry that I was actually starting to learn not to be codependent. I was learning not to stand on my own and achieve my power. So yeah, so that's that's what it took. You know, to find that person to help me teach to learn these things. So yeah, and from there came the podcast, and hey, and now I have Susan Gold in front of me, who wrote the book. What's the name of your book again?
It's called Toxic Family: Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom.
Yeah. So yeah. So it's on Amazon, right?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everywhere books are sold. And if you really feel drawn about anything you've heard today, or you feel drawn to be in touch, susangold.us is the place.
That's right. It is a .us. Um, what is it? What is the beauty that you're really trying to create with all the work you do?
Peace, tranquility, freedom, just shifting out of that matrix, Michael, that I was so hamstrung into. That things had to be done a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
that you had to follow like an automaton. I mean, and it's across the board. It's almost with every structure, every corporate structure, right? I never fit into that corporate system, though. I think I had a stint at ICM and a stint at Fox, and I was like I was on Mars. I just didn't fit in that construct, and it's breaking out of those and realizing that I'm a human being here with purpose for an education in soul evolution. That's what I truly, truly believe. And once I've sort of shifted my perspective and my outlook, it's a lot more pleasant and a lot more hope filled being here.
Yeah. So is the world looking more beautiful to you?
It does. Well, plus it doesn't hurt that I heeded another intuitive call and I never thought I'd leave sunny Southern California, but I moved to rural Montana and I grew up in a small town. And I had a cabin in the woods when I lived in New York City up in the Catskills. So Montana's a bit like that times 10. So it's really hard to be down in the dumps for too long because you just look outside and it's just nature is stunning.
Wow. Yeah. Nature is stunning, and um, one of my favorite things to do is to look up at the stars at night. It's like I go down to the beach and I look up at the stars at night, and then I realize how small everything really is and how wonderful everything can be, right? So, have you created that? I would say I'm going to change this question. I usually ask, well, if you could create the perfect world for you, have you created that perfect world for you?
It feels like it's come to me. I mean, Montana was not even on my bucket list, Michael, and I definitely was led here. Um, and I just, I thought, well, if you come to Montana, you live in the forests, don't you? And I'm living on the prairie. It's very expansive. And I thought, why would I move to Montana to live on the prairie? But just there wasn't much available in this tiny town where I wanted to live. And what was a fit was on the prairie. And so I just took it as a signal and decided, yep, that's it. And now I live in like a natural oil painting where nature is the background and the painting keeps changing and the sky is expansive and there's wildflowers and there's green. And I just feel like I loved New York City for the time I was there and I was
Mm-hmm.
happy in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
But now I am in rural bliss and I feel like I am living in heaven on earth.
Yeah. So, I know before we got started recording, I asked you about the photograph that's your background. You said that that was a photograph of your backyard.
Yeah, so the photograph behind me is my backyard and I have several others out different windows. I'd love to shoot into the window and right out into nature, but there's too much backlight. So I always take a photo and just put it behind me and it's really where I live. If I look out my front window, it looks a little like Tuscany and down the side it looks like the Nepali coast and Kauai and out the back there's the Canadian Rockies and it looks like the
Yeah.
Swiss Alps. So I just let go and source delivered. What can I say?
Yeah.
It's just magical to be here.
Yeah. You live east of the Rockies, don't you?
I do, but the
Okay.
Canadian Rockies are north of me, and I'm
Yeah.
4 miles from the Canadian border.
Yeah. There's something we have in common. I'm about a 2 mile walk to the U.S. border. um, yeah. I was just trying to picture which side of the Rockies are, because I'm west of the Rockies, and I've seen them from both sides, and the Rockies are just phenomenal. I've actually seen the Rockies as far south as Colorado. So yeah, beautiful, beautiful scenery no matter where you go along them. So yeah, um,
And how lucky we are we can appreciate it, because for so long my head was down on the pavement. It took
yeah.
me a minute to recognize, oh, there's sky here, there's tree leaves fluttering. Yeah.
So spiritually, how have you made your perfect world?
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't have a disciplined meditation practice. I went for years where I had to sit on the cushion in a certain way and practice a certain way. I had to do silent week-long meditation retreats. And every time I would be in the middle of one, I'd be like, I'm paying money to do this. Like I could be on a beach somewhere. But my spiritual practice is not as formal. It's more intuitive. It's more natural. It can be
Mm-hmm.
just having my feet in the dirt and connecting and realizing I'm connecting. It can be sitting at my desk, realizing I don't even remember when my last breath was, and then taking one in and being cognizant of it. It's much more simple than it was, and I feel it's healthier than some kind of disciplined have to.
Yeah, that sounds like true freedom to me. So anyway, best ways to get a hold of you again is at susangold.us, and if we go to Amazon, Toxic Families, right?
Toxic family, transforming childhood trauma into adult freedom.
Yeah. Very long title, but very meaningful book. Yeah. So, thank you for joining us. It's been
Michael, thank
wonderful.
you. Thank you for having me. I know that it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes finances, it takes purpose to do what you do with your podcast. And I really appreciate it. I appreciate the content that you're putting out for all of us and all you're producing. So thank you.
Thank and thank you. That is quite the compliment. All right. Thank you for listening, everybody, and please do go and get Susan Gold's book, or if you want a more personal conversation or email with her, go to susangold.us.
And I looked up at a shooting star, and then I wondered who you are. I just need to know. So I wish upon that shooting star, and then I wondered where you are. Is it dead?
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.